Welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm Phyllis Klein, and this is Poets in Conversation. And tonight, our readers are Jen Martelli and Gill O'Neill. Having them is an especially generous gift that I treasure. Their poetry travels on strands of pearls, on glitter roads, through sweetness, memory, and history into territories of bitterness, loss, cruelty, and healing. Some of Jen Martelli's books have poems interspersed about real people, and she writes to bring forward themes of violence towards women, control, religion, and how to resist. The book we'll be focusing on tonight, Queen of Queens, has poems for Geraldine Ferraro, Madonna, Nancy Pelosi, and Molly Ringwald, among others, and is dedicated to Geraldine Ferraro and Kamala Harris. Strands of pearls grace the cover and string together the theme with pearls, finding their way into almost all of the poems in the collection. It might be all of them. I, I, I don't know for sure, but we can ask her. Again, Jen finds history as a light to shed on the personal, illuminating her own life in the context of history. January Gill O'Neill writes about coming back stronger in the broken places. She writes about a wide variety of topics we can all relate to: joy, courage, showing up, family, romance, divorce, loss, regret, and whatever she wants to say, what gives her life meaning. Here's a quote from someone who knows her well, and this quote is from Nin Andrews. January Gill O'Neill is a poet you can trust. With every book, every poem, every stanza, she writes with such grace, insight, clarity, and honesty, delineating the music, moments, and moods of her life as a mother, a divorcee, a single woman, and one that one feels while reading, uplifted, inspired, and even rewilded, which is the name of another one of her books. She is a poet who touches the heart within the heart, the muse within the music, the magic within the ordinary. She is, in short, what most poets can only aspire to be, beautiful and true. So now, because of the continuing atrocities going on worldwide, and the fact that it is Memorial Day weekend, so I've been thinking a lot about war, and for lots of reasons. I'm going to start with a poem by Jen, and I wanted to read one of Jan's Emmett Till poems also, but in the interest of time, I'm going to let her read it because she had decided to include that. So what I love about this poem of Jen's is how she gets to the marrow of anger unapologetically and with total honesty. And the other thing is that there's a nuance in here when she's talking about some white porcelain that breaks on the floor. She also talks about how it captures light, and that's happening in the midst of all this rage. So I think that's really, really beautiful and terrific as well. So, so here we go. Yesterday, I was so angry, I broke things with my mind. The chunky juice glass on the granite counter, the cat's chipped saucers for kibble and cream, the thick white mug, its shattered curves lay in fat white pieces, thick as oyster shells, the brokenness capturing light like a poem about the moon or the moon's memory of tide. I've been angry for so long. Or maybe just afraid of not really being here. Parts of me in pieces, left eye, my upper lip, the third rib, the mound at the base of my thumb. One of those seasonal constellations connected with a finger. Cleaning it up was hardest. Its skinny pieces reflected blue and cold, hungry like a mirror. They wanted the tender instep, the calloused soul. They wanted the deep green purple vein. I swept and swept with my favorite whisk broom, but still the tiny slivers shone all over my floor. A night sky magnetized and inversed. Wow. Yeah, thank you for that poem, Jen. So, and now I'm going to introduce Jan. Um, January Gill O'Neill is an associate professor at Salem State University and the author of Glitter Road, Rewilding, Misery Islands, and the Underlife, all published by Cavan Carey Press. From 2019 to 2020, she served as the John and Renee Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi, Oxford. She lives in Beverly, Massachusetts. And here's a picture of the cover, this magnificent cover. Um, and um, and a lot of this book was written in Mississippi, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely about Mississippi, and I'll talk about that a little.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. So yes, and Jen, sorry about the laptop issue. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for coming in. Yes, thanks everybody for Saturday night, on a holiday weekend to hang out with us. That's great. So I'm gonna read a few poems from Glitter Road, which is about my time as the John and Renee Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi, also known as Old Miss. I was there from November. No, I was there from uh, August 2019 to May 2020. So we were there, and then COVID hit, and then we went home. So it was myself and my two teenagers, and we had a great time down there. I mean, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about the landscape and the people. But Mississippi, is Mississippi, and it has its challenges. Before we went down, there was a photo that went viral of three Old Miss students standing next to a an Emmett Till marker, and it was full of bullet holes. These boys were standing there with their rifles, and that picture went viral. And between that and a few other things that had happened, sort of questioned what kind of environment we were walking into. Because I live in Massachusetts. But I mean, it was a reminder that there are good people everywhere, and every once in a while, it's good to step out of our bubbles. And so I'm going to read a few poems around that, and then move to happier territory. This first poem is called Low Delta Country. Driving along Highway 6, I'm not sure where the towns begin and end. Heavy trees lean ground close, choked by kudzu. Roots growing over enslaved land, wild daffodils sprouting across long demolished plantations and working farms, plots hawked with mostly unmarked graves. I should have chased that laughter at the gas station and said hello to whoever stood there, but had nowhere else to go but inside. Only towns, like only children, carry the loneliness of broken windows in their eyes. They disappear when the buzzards stop their soar over shorn fields, give up mid-air, and drop like a wine bottle. Goldenrod, deer bones, billboards for now defunct businesses in the town's one strip mall. Maybe some places should rewild. In the land of John Deere, machines pick clean what the enslaved did by hand. Irrigation rigs, big as pterodactyls, sit idle after the harvest. Tufts of cotton fleck the landscape like cheap insulation. Oh, I think I misnumbered my pages. I did. Okay. Three white Old Miss students used guns to vandalize a memorial to lynching victim Emmett Till. Emmett Till being a 14-year-old boy who was beaten, shot, thrown into the Tallahatchie um, for allegedly whistling at a white woman. The title comes from, is a subhead from a USA Today article from July 2019. They pose their bodies as if they've just bagged their first 10-point buck. One holds a shotgun, another squats below the shot up sign, a third stands with an AR 15. Three faces smiling, hoisting guns in front of a bullet ridden marker. This is the site where Till's body was removed from the river. It is hunter's hours. The sign's jagged holes could slice a finger. Those students are someone's sons or brothers, not much older than the young black boy, his body beaten, tethered to a 75-pound cotton gin fan and thrown into the Tallahatchie. This is an old story, a Southern Gothic. To deny this boy's life and then deny the marker that says he lived breaks me every time. The camera captures the night's dark cover, the tall grasses, the momentary flash illuminating their shit-eating grins, and the gun barrel's glint. Lifetimes of getting away with it. And so we were there, for an academic year, and then we left because, again, it was COVID. But I've been back many times, and one of the things I wanted to do but didn't get to do initially was to take a canoe ride down the Mississippi. So we went back in 2021 as a family and did that. The river remembers. Here, the water is silt brown, stretches mile wide, flat as a washed out conveyor belt, an unhemmed rumble strip. I can't read the river, can't see my hand when it plunges elbow deep to feel the cool against the Mississippi.
Well, we're kind of plagued with some technical difficulties here. Are you back?
Did Jan freeze?
Yeah.
Oh no. She just texted me. Yeah, she just said she lost her Wi-Fi.
Yeah, this is like poltergeist or something, you know?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know. So I don't know if everybody knows, but Jen also was having a lot of trouble with her computer and couldn't get on at all. So she's on her phone. So yeah, so these two readers are really good friends. And and spend a lot of time at the kitchen table, is it? Where do you do your editing?
Well, it's funny. We
Or
used
is it
to
not?
meet. Yeah, we used to meet at this coffee shop in Salem, and it went from a workshop to sort of a, I don't know, complaining, gossiping, poetry talk kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
we do a lot of our workshopping, sometimes at the Starbucks in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we'll do it on Zoom. Oh, she's coming back. Jan's coming back.
And
Jan
Jan
is
is
coming.
back.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if what's happening. Oh,
Yeah.
good. There you are. Oh man.
Well, Sorry about that.
This is like the hour of technical difficulties here. But
Yeah.
you
Now
know, we were
that's
just
never happened. I did lose my
never to
Wi-Fi.
me either. Yeah. So we were just talking about you and Jen being good friends and how you have grown into editing together and in different from different groups. And why don't you just pick back up where you were? Maybe I don't know, start that poem over, and
Or
hopefully the
it's such a long
poltergeist
poem.
will.
All right. If for some reason I drop out again, I will just log in on my phone. I've downloaded that
Okay,
application.
well, we're used to that. We've been through that tonight, so good.
That's
Yeah.
dog table. Hold on for a second.
Oh, your dog. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. The river remembers. Here the water is silt brown, stretches mile wide, flat as a washed out rumbles. Oh, sorry. I can hear my daughter in the next room.
It's all right.
Here the water is silt brown, stretches mile wide, flat as a washed out conveyor belt, an unhemmed rumble strip. I can't read the river, can't see my hand when it plunges elbow deep to feel the cool against the Mississippi heat, hot as a dog's mouth. Here we canoe for hours through swirling eddies, watch the trash barges and towboats travel downstream. The river glistens hard as broken glass. Here everything is fluid. In lower Mississippi, the South South, where the 2-lane blacktop cuts through an infinity of flat, cotton, soybean, corn, farm, tumble down shack, creeks and rivers bifurcate the land like blood veins. Here the GPS gives up. New islands form at the current's whim, and what is untouched grows lush and verdant. Willow and privet border the collapsing coastline. A carp leaps into the boat when it hears us coming. We stop here in an oxbow. Gumbo mud sticks to our feet. River rock, plastic, fossils, gar. Raccoon and coyote leave tracks in rust colored sand. The slaves, sold down the river, hid here, waited for their chance to escape up north, hid in caves, fled to the Twin Cities and Canada, their fate at the mercy of the river's next rise. Here's the nadir of our suffering, which started in one place to end in another. Here's where flow and marvel and history converge. This harm joy, this beautiful sadness. And for some reason, because everything else seems to be wacky tonight, my eye is incredibly irritated. So, excuse me. Just par for the course. Par for the course. Okay. Well, our time in Mississippi, gave us an opportunity to explore slavery in a way that I hadn't. And I'm a Virginia native, so I'm not new to the South. It gave us an opportunity to explore the history and the trauma that was there. But I like to say there was a lot of joy in Mississippi as well. And so, one of the things that I can say, as being a small part of a group is that because it was the John Grisham residency, John Grisham of the firm and all the lawyer books and movies, I can solidly say that I slept in John Grisham's bed. I slept in John Grisham's bed, a bed on stilts, queen sized, with a well in the center I'd always roll into, white pilled sheets, threadbare and thinning. I worked hard to earn that bed and the room surrounding it, meaning I must have written words once that meant something. Big wide windows look onto a cluster of magnolias that never lose their leaves. No blinds. I like to let the light in. I imagine John Grisham plotting out a bestseller, yellow legal pad in hand, kids like mine bouncing on a mattress high enough to touch the ceiling fan. This bed I have shared with many authors and lovers who also wrote words that meant something. They slept here, loved here too, on this bed that scoots away from the wooden headboard from too much movement. Can't help but laugh at the bedroom door that doesn't lock, sliding a chair in front of it for privacy, or the attic we were afraid to enter, the creak of the floorboards above our heads. And when I think my big thoughts about the world, time travel, or black holes, or God, or death, I come to the bed's blank page against the shimmer of sky glow. And I will just read two more. One of the nice parts about being in Mississippi at the time I was there is that I fell in love. And so my boyfriend lives in Mississippi, works for the University of Mississippi, and we've been long distance ever since. And so we fondly think of that time as our Mississippi season. Mississippi season. He says I hold my mind well, likes that I put my kids first, and have never tried drugs. The lilt in his southern drawl intoxicates me. He likes not being able to have all of me, makes him want me more. Broken finds broken, I say. So when he kisses my neck along my clavicle down to my breast, I break all over again. After a drought of no kissing, no touch. How not being chosen can dim any light. For years, I told myself a story I could live with, thought of myself a kind of carnival fish in a plastic bag, floating in my own still water, waiting to be loved. Dumb luck that someone flips a red ring on the mouth of a glass jar, and just like that, I am kissing again, kissing a man so luminous, so beautifully flawed, I can barely look at him. And my mind, done with all its stories, turns to the carnal as I rim the hinge of the lips with my tongue and dive into this quenching. And I will end with the last Mississippi poem, the last one in the book, the title poem, Glitter Road. I'll take my miracles however they appear these days. A salamander poking its head above the bricks, the shocking pink overcoat of the season's first bluebird, a spider web unbroken. At the corner of Molly Bar and McElroy, I saw a thick trail of glitter in the curve of the right turn lane. Fuchsia, heavy shimmer refracting the noonday sun as if laying flat a rainbow's extracted hue. Not paint or blood or parade shedding its cheer. It's the faded streak of eyeshadow as it trails into flecks, then disappears. I think of cars passing through this moment, their undercarriages aglow with possibility. Hard not to feel good riding a glistening wave, my tires now bespeckled with a purple sheen that's tough to rid or wash away, the road ahead made beautiful by this temporary shine. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you
happy,
so much.
happy to sit back and listen to Jen read.
Yeah, really. Get out of that spotlight. Yeah. Wow. Well, Jen, why don't you come and join us and we'll schmooze for a little bit. Yeah, and try to relax after all that.
Oh, I know. This has
all
been
that.
Phyllis,
was-
you're so gracious too and patient.
Oh,
you're just rolling with it all. It's
well, thank you.
wonderful.
Well, yeah. Well, I feel really so comfortable with both of you that yeah, it just feels so nice to be together and to hear this amazing poetry. So yeah, I just there's something about it's almost hard to talk about, to figure out how to delve into it a little bit. Maybe Jen, maybe if you could say what it is that you feel about Jan's poetry, and maybe even one of the ones that she just read. But what is it that makes it just shine and sparkle for you?
Well, I mean, it's just really good poetry. I mean, technically, they're wonderful
Darn it,
poems. And,
yeah.
Jan, it's funny as I was sort of going through the list that you had sent that you were going to read, and of course, I've read this book and I've
Mhm.
read it in progress.
Mhm.
So I just want to speak for a second about the um, about the technical aspect and the poem that you read, the three white Ole Miss
Yep.
students. What was that,
Mhm.
page 51? So I was
Yes.
looking at this and I'm like, why does this work so well? I mean, I mean, granted, it's this amazing topic, this horrifying topic. I think about the kid in the Ole Miss frat just recently who got
Mhm.
thrown out of the frat. He was
Yeah.
jeering at a protester. And I thought of you. I thought of this poem, but I was looking at the tercets, and the moment in this poem, right? One, two, three. The fourth stanza
Mhm.
is the hinge. Those students are someone's sons or brothers, not much older than the young black boy, his body
Mhm.
beaten, tethered. So right in the middle of this poem, you've got this moment of identification with these
Yeah.
monstrous kids,
Yeah.
and then you go back to like, this is horrible and what they, and
Yeah.
but it's just so brilliantly done, and it just kind of it's right there. I know I don't know if people can see me, but I'm making the universal hinge in a poem.
Very good. It's very good.
But
Yeah.
it reminded me somewhat, Phyllis, of your poem Inheritance.
Mm.
That was the name of it. What you do on the line, and you're doing it the same thing. It's sort of
Mhm.
mimicking
Mhm.
what the poem is about. You have these really staccato little sentences on these long lines, and it's about
Mhm.
this brokenness being passed down. Anyway,
Thank you for
it's
that.
something that I'm sort of focusing
Mm.
on lately. So
Well, I think
now,
you did it. Yeah, I think in the anger poem that I just read, that to me, that hinge of finding the light
Mhm.
in the broken mug on the
Mhm.
floor, that to me is very much that way too.
Yeah.
It
yeah,
brings in this nuance that is really terrific.
right.
Yeah.
And what I mean, to go back to your question, so what do I love about Jan's poetry? Again, so there's the technical part of
Not to
poetry
embarrass
that
you too much here, but we're gonna mush on
That's
you
all right.
now.
I know that. No.
We'll turn it around
Make sure
soon.
your Wi-Fi doesn't cut out
Yeah.
again.
Really, you got to hear this, right?
But you do something that I cannot do in my poetry, and this is a goal. You do it too, Phyllis, in your book.
Oh, no kidding.
You write about joy, and I think that's my next thing. I think you both do it so well, and
Well,
without being in any way, like I hate using this word. It's an MFA word. It's earned.
yeah.
I believe it. I believe
Well,
that joy exists as well as all the grief, and
yeah.
you do it.
Well, thank you. I mean, for this book, it was really important to talk about, like, the some of the joyful things that did happen while we were in
Yeah.
Mississippi and also Massachusetts and other places. There's so a lot of the Black stories that come out really are heart wrenching, and they do need to be told. But there's a whole range of other poems out there that touch upon an amazing array of subject matter. And so it was important for me for this collection not to be all about sorrow. And so,
Right.
joy being the flip side of sorrow. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But like, so I mean, we've been joking a little bit about anger. And so I kind of, I wish I could sustain anger. I can't in a poem,
Oh,
not
well, yeah.
not to where
Oh,
it's satisfying.
well,
But
you've
I mean,
got the two of us to help you with that.
yeah, so I mean, I just love, it doesn't mean I don't get angry, but I just love how
Right.
Jen
I
pulls
get that.
everything in, and you'll all hear it later how, I mean, she's so exacting and precise, and like she's like a sniper, like a poetry sniper with
Yeah,
those.
I love
I
that too. And
mean,
I see
and
Juan, yeah. I
yeah,
see
and
Juan has something to say, but I'll be with you in a minute, Juan. Okay, yeah. So go ahead, Jen.
yeah, no, I just to finish up. I mean, I don't want to, I want to get to
Mm,
Jen's poems and hear them, but like, she really documented, Queen of Queens, and talking about the, Nancy Pelosi and Geraldine Ferraro, and really some of the pivotal women leaders of our time. And no
mhm,
one else is doing that kind of work in
right.
poetry. So,
Mhm.
I mean, and if we don't tell these stories, they don't get told, they don't get remembered. So I think her work is as valuable as anyone writing today. So,
Totally agreed. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I'm thinking about I was at a Hudson Valley Writers Center Zoom reading. It was in the winter, and Claudia Rankin was there, and
mhm,
somebody asked her about, I mean, not all her poetry is political, but
right,
she writes like nobody else
right.
does, about this. And she said something great, and I think this applies, Jan, to your work, and to Phyllis, your work. She said, I don't want to say it wasn't a challenge to her, but the whole idea of like political or angry poetry, or she said, I write what I write, what comes to me. Anything else is for another conversation. And that just resonated with me because it took the pressure off, I think, a lot of poets, about writing, a certain kind of poetry.
Mhm,
And I think in Glitter Road, I think you do this in all your books, Jen. That there's definitely a through line,
mhm.
when your collected comes out, uh, people will see that, but you've got the Ella's flowers throughout the book, and the river throughout the book,
Yeah.
and you have the Emmett Till story, and you have you talk about Mississippi and racism,
Mhm,
but you talk about love and falling in love, and
mhm,
and your wonderful kids
Mhm.
too, and
And regret
that
too.
these,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's all about
yes, and
regret.
these,
Regret nothing. I
yeah,
mean, that is in
yeah,
the middle
yeah.
of it all. It's so beautiful and so positive, right?
right,
I don't
right.
feel like I'm that positive at all, but
I think
much
my
more,
I think
yeah.
my positivity might wear Jen out sometimes.
No.
Yeah, well, it's nice. It's a nice counterbalance. Yeah. We need that. Yeah. So let me get Juan on. Yeah, Juan, you had a question or a
Yeah,
comment?
thank you so much for beautiful reading. I just had a quick question, if I may. I just wanted to know, like, how you navigate the, like, do you anchor us in reality and then you take us away? And I'm just wondering how, you go about doing that.
Hmm. I'm going to try to answer it. So if I'm not close, you can let me know. I mean, I really start with the moment. Um, I don't always write, well, with the Mississippi poems, I knew I was going to write about Emmett Till, but I didn't write about them right away. I took notes. I write about going to the rededication ceremony. I visited many of the memorials that have been memorialized, or at least are important to the Emmett Till story, because a lot of those places are not properly um secured. It's an odd thing about what gets memorialized, what gets remembered, what doesn't. um but most of the time, when I write, I'm writing for, Emmett Till poems are an exception, but I write for quantity sometimes, with writing challenges. So, you know, I think I just like to torture myself, but I, there's something about, I teach my students, if you can write about anything. And so a lot of times when you're writing a poem a day for a month, you literally are writing about anything and everything and seeing what happens. And I think, I'm impressed. I'm interested in people who write every day, and there are a few out there who write every day, no matter what. Like, that's not me. But every few months, I try to start, and I start with a moment. Might be an image, might be a line of text, might be a sound. I'm not like beholden to one thing. And so, especially when, like, it's day 14 of a writing challenge. I mean, you know, we're at this point, you can only write so many about the bird feeder and the dog and whatnot. So, and not all those poems get seen. Those are the ones
Yeah.
that it's all practice, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I like that. It's all practice. Yeah. So let's practice with Jen now. I'm going to introduce her, and then we'll have some more the same conversation. And nobody's internet is going to cut out ever again. Okay, so Jennifer Martelli has received fellowships from the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Poetry, Verse Daily, Plume, the Tahoma Literary Review, and elsewhere. Her latest collection, The Queen of Queens, won the Italian American Studies Association Book Award and was shortlisted for the Massachusetts Book Award. And she is also the the co-poetry editor for Mom Egg Review. And let me just show you the cover of her book. And we're gonna be talking about pearls, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Phyllis. And again, I will always be grateful for your patience because I'm not sure what happened to everybody's computers today. I'm doing this on my phone because for some reason the Zoom wasn't working on my computer. So it's very strange. I can only see myself. I'm afraid to touch my phone because you might all go away. So yeah, the Queen of Queens is a term that then Governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, gave to vice presidential nominee Geraldine Ferraro in 1984. She had been the congresswoman from a district in Queens, so he introduced her as the Queen of Queens. And I loved this title. I didn't know if people were going to confuse it with RuPaul, but I was fine with that. And I also like sort of the Catholic undertones too, so that's where I got the title. I started writing this book pre-COVID, and basically, I mean, I never start my collections. I never think I am starting a collection at all, but I was thinking about the 80s and all the great clothes and all the great music. I graduated college, I graduated from BU in 1984, and I was so pleased for the first time to be able to vote for a woman on a presidential ticket. Geraldine Ferraro was the 1984 vice presidential nominee. She was running with Walter Mondale against Ronald Reagan and George Bush, and they lost every state except Minnesota. They lost nice liberal Massachusetts. They lost her home state. And I remember just being shocked. I mean, and I was a foolish 22-year-old. I mean, I was a 22-year-old. Just how the Italian American community sort of just didn't support her at all. How my own state didn't support her, and how many women just, would not vote for her because she was a woman. So this book talks about that, and it talks about music, and it talks about women disappearing. My mother makes an appearance. She died from Alzheimer's in 2011. So I don't have a lot of joy. I do have some joy. I have a lot of food, though, and some really great music from the 80s. So anyway, I hope you like this. I will start with sort of the origin story, watching clips of the Democratic National Convention, July 19th, 1984. There's an epigraph by Cokie Roberts. There she was, looking beautiful and looking female. Pearls encircled Geraldine Ferraro like tiny moons around a Mother Earth, pearls created from mother of pearl, protective, that iridescent layer, the hard, luminescent surface inside the hinged shell. Ferraro wears long strands long to her breastbone, Back then, I took fistfuls of tiny fake strings, white, gold, gray, and I'd twist them like cables, wore them tight and torqued around my neck. As I watched the clips of the nomination of Geraldine Ferraro to the vice presidency of the United States, I look away out my east-facing window to the warm sun, warm finally this late in June. The doomed Japanese cherry tree split, then split again by lightning bolts, flowered for the first time this season, flowered pink and full of tiny leaves, so lush and tangled, I almost forget the thick branches we lost to the chainsaw. My name, she says, is Geraldine Ferraro. All the women reach their arms up to her, wave and reach as if offered open-handed, a merciful pearl, a grace one time, then snatch back and slap shut. That tree is finally down, by the way. It was very sad. I pulled into the driveway one day and it was completely on its side with its roots sticking out. Gray Figs and Leaves by Wedgwood. My mother's china was bone white, barely used and rimmed with 14-karat gold. Nobody wanted it after she died deep into that awful summer. The bowls were too shallow, could barely hold one ladleful of the alia olea that only my uncle was allowed to make each Christmas Eve. The olive oil rose in fat round shapes, made a slick layer on the hot broth above the angel hair, around the single anchovy, its salty, thick ocean taste lasting too long. My great aunt, the Strega, would read our futures, how the oil refused to sink, how it refused to join, how the oil could look like a monster's egg or the lost green beryl that fell from my mother's ring. Sometimes I forget what is memory and what is wished for. Would my mother be with me for all time? Would I keep her china with the wreath of gray figs and leaves with metal paint that could explode? What of her ring? So one of the strange things, as I said, I started writing this before the pandemic. And this book and my previous book, My Tarantella, were really, really affected by the election of Donald Trump in ways that I don't know if I'll ever completely understand. But one of the things that was happening as I was writing this book, it was just amazing to me. I felt it was like there was this repetition going on from the early 80s to the 2000 teens, like 2018, 2019. I mean, Donald Trump was, I mean, he was around in the 80s, and Reagan reminded me of Trump in a way, and in many ways I feel that he was a precursor. And then we got hit with COVID. And I thought back to the AIDS pandemic, and I lost so many friends, and just the feckless and cruel way both pandemics were approached. The Reagan administration didn't even say the word until about 1985. This poem, the title is a quote from Reagan's deputy press secretary, Larry Speaks. There's this horrifying recording of him, and they would joke about it. They were calling it, the gay cancer, and you could hear them laughing about it. I don't have it, do you? I remember that man who joked about death, and then he died from Alzheimer's. My mother also died from Alzheimer's, and so there is no God. Deep into coronavirus's sway, I drove through the rain to my childhood home. That man joked for 3 years, joked about fairies and kissing, things he believed made a man less of a man, things he believed made a man a woman. My mother forgot everything but her fear, and so there is no justice. The new owners put a stone facade over part of the old house, tonal colors my mother would have liked, big blocks of fake rock. Lentivirus, long incubation. Lent, long days. Lent, it shall be returned. I stay awake until first pearl light. The whole world has been canceled, and so there is no time. Jan, I'm not sure if I wrote this during our sonnet challenge. I think I wrote this before. The next poem is a sonnet a kind of sonnet that I had never heard about, and I learned from Diane Seuss. And this sonnet, and she learned this, I believe, from Allen Ginsberg. So it's 14 lines, like a sonnet. Each line has 17 syllables. So it's like a haiku stretched out. And it begins with a quote from Geraldine Ferraro, which had exactly 17 syllables. So I felt this poem was meant to be. One of the things that, one of the criticisms against her was that she didn't take her husband's name, Zucchero. She kept her, maiden name, foolish term. But my father was an Italian man, so are my husband and my son. Sometimes when my stiff joints pop, women appear and want to talk to me. No matter how carefully I move, these women want to use their tongues. We all know that the dead can't speak, but some can shake rice in a tin sieve. A poet told me the first tambourine was formed in Italian groves where women danced while cleaning rice, and later where women conjured ghosts. I was ashamed to tell them I swapped my father's name for my husband's. The vowels so round at the end, they slipped into my smooth white sockets. No matter how far back I searched, the names were father's names, thick as guns. If I owned a gun, it would have a cool, ghost white mother of pearl grip and an exposed silver tone barrel, silver back strap, slide, and hammer. Its sound would sound more like air sucked out from small pink lungs or finger snaps. No matter how far back I traveled, Avellino, Salerno, Rome, all I found was a man's silver axe, his hammer, a boy, a blacksmith. No matter how I move now, women pop out of me. They sound like guns. And I'll read two more. This is a funny story. So the book had gone into production, and Kamala Harris, was nominated. And I felt like a perfect circle had been formed. So I had to change a few things in this book. I remember calling my publisher. I'm like, can you change these quickly to get Kamala in there? So I was just so happy. Okay. Relinquishing. For months now, I've refused 3 types of flesh, from a cow, a pig, a fowl. I'm not pure, though. I can't resist cheese in its clotted shades, creamy, knobbed and knotted mozzarella, bone chèvre, veined blue. For Christmas, G mailed me a tin of struffoli, small balls of fried dough drenched in honey, sprinkled with candy beads, sticky gold drops on the tin lid. The bees in the comb that made that honey humped and were smoked out of the hive. They loved their queen, left all baffled and alone. Someday, my kids may write about me. Not a poem, but maybe a list of all the hurtful seedlings I planted like radium in their glands. Maybe they will remember some love too, though mostly I was afraid. G's cancer leaps throughout her body. When I call to thank her, we talk about turmeric. I asked her, as a vegan, would she wear pearls? The oyster, pried open for its hard, comforting spit, looks clitoral, the salty, faceless meat. And I will end. The irony of all of this is, Geraldine Ferraro was, strongly pro-choice. And she, in 1984, had more federal protections than we have now. And that is horrific. This poem has an epigraph again from Ferraro. The Catholic Church is not monolithic in its teachings of abortions. Questions to the electorate. Is a man a monolith? Can you decorate a monolith with sprigs of nutmeg, rue, pennyroyal, a garden of abortifacients? Can you grow savin, squills, ergot of rye around the monolith? Can you dig down far enough so the roots will embed? Can I rule as a monolith? Can I rule as a woman who's had not one but two abortions and is still not sad? Can I rule as a woman who is not sad at all? Can we drape the monolith with pearls, chunky fake gems? Can we polish its dark marble surface until it shines like the tombstones in the cemetery? Will you circle the monolith? Will you join hands with me and dance and dance and dance? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jen. I just, yeah, hearts and thumbs up. And yeah, I just really wish you both could have read more. It's such a joy to hear your poetry. You're talking about joy. Both of your poetry brings joy.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, no, I was thinking about do all of your poems have pearl, or do they have pearls in all of them? Or most of them?
Pretty much. It's funny. I think, Phyllis, you had asked that too.
I saw it I read more than what you read. I read a lot of your poems.
Yeah.
They all had a pearl in them.
Well,
Yeah,
It's amazing.
well, I think the whole image of the pearl, I mean, there were a lot of reasons for it. Just on a simple fashion level, everybody was wearing pearls in the 80s, like fake pearls, long pearls, colored pearls, and when Ferraro accepted the nomination at the convention, she had, the white dress, the suffrage dress and pearls. So it helped a lot to have this round thing, because again, I don't know if anybody else does this when they're putting a book together. I started to see it like it has a shape or a color to it sometimes, and then I just saw this pearl, like, going through it, and that just sort of helped with organizing and I mean, I didn't want it to be ridiculous, where there shouldn't be a pearl, to throw a pearl in there. I didn't want it to be like that, but for some reason they all like were kind of falling in line, falling on the string for me. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then you have the poem that we didn't have time for, that you didn't read, which is the first one in the book, 16 Reasons I Became a
Oh,
Gray Pearl.
Pro-Am, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a gray pearl, which is so interesting to me, right? And there are so many amazing reasons. My goodness, like, felt unsure, so I committed to pescatarianism. I mean, anyway, yeah, so you've got that. It's just like they're everywhere in this amazing way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And if not pearls, but there's this toughness for the women that you're writing about. I think it's emblematic of who you are. Coupled with like lots of objects of the everyday. And I mean, again, that precision. Pearls, yes, but descriptions of China and you know, particular sauces and things that go with customs because you're Italian and all of that. And so it's really wonderful. And then the trees, you know, I think about, you do have a few trees running through your book also.
Well, you pointed that out in one of our groups. I mean, there's just maples all up and down my street, and a lot of them are gone, you know.
Right.
But I'm
Yeah.
always like, and I looked out and saw the maple, so I have to change my trees up a little bit.
That's funny. I don't
That's
know.
funny.
It's working for the poem, so I don't know.
Oh gosh, and then yeah, then you have the women popping out of some, I mean, that image of, you know, Geraldine Ferraro. Sometimes my stiff joints pop, women appear and want to talk to me. I mean, wow.
Well, you know, and again, this is something, Jen, I think we've talked about. I mean, one of the reasons why I try to have as many objects in my poem is because I will sometimes, I know I don't always write in a chronological way. So if I figure if I take these leaps, if I have something like, you know, a pen, you know, to hold on to, it's like, oh, I know what a pen is, you know. So I think that grounds me, you know, it kind of keeps me in a place where then I feel like I can go off a little bit more.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you also, you know, are quite the technician. As I look through this, I mean, there is a certain, you know, you remind me a little bit. This is not going to be a good example, but you remind me a little bit of like a decorator, like a cake decorator, and putting, you know, all of the, to use Cindy's title, I think, embellishments all around. There's Colleen's. Put all the embellishments around a cake, like, you know, all of the precision. I was just thumbing through, like, watching clips of the Democratic National Convention, July 19th, 1984, and just to look at that poem and how it's staggered out, you know, creating your own form in there.
Right.
Lots of couplets and tercets all the way through, erasures. I mean, like, you know, different forms, like in tongue root, where there's a list.
Yeah.
You know, not to mention also, I just love, it's sort of like a trip through a period of time, the 80s and 90s. So like all these great, I mean, these titles like, oh, I mean, Toxic Shock Duplex and Ghost
That's
Hunter.
Jericho Brown.
Yes, it is. But I'm looking at the forms, but I'm also looking just at the titles. You know, Madonna Triptych, 1984. You know, Nancy Pelosi's Beads, 1984 through the present, which is a great listing poem. You know,
Right.
so I mean, I see you all over this. I am surprised though that you don't actually wear pearls.
I know. You know, I probably have them. I never wear them. I think I did for like one of the readings when the book first came out. So, you know, it's funny with the forms. I had read Yona Harvey's book. What is it? You Don't Have to Go to Mars. Her latest book, To
Yeah.
Fall in Love. Is that? I know I'm probably botching the title. It's a great book. But what I loved about that is that I loved the shapes of all the poems. You know, if you go through it, you know, it's no section breaks. And all the poems, you know, there's just something beautiful just about how each poem looks different, you know, and that really informed me, you know, when I was putting this book together, which, you know, that's the worst thing in the world to do, is to put together a book of poems. You know,
Yeah.
oh, it's just so painful.
Mhm.
I don't mind, like when you send Glitter Road around, you know, you said like, let's look at this, you know, look at this. I can do other people's.
I think it's some people really like doing it and some people don't. I don't know if anybody's kind of mediocre. How are you on that, Jan? Do you like to do it or?
You know, I got out. So I was saying, you know, before we went live, that I was at a I was at Poetry by the Sea in Connecticut,
Yeah.
and that's like small workshop groups, and it's a really lovely, 3-4 days away. And
Mm,
I think I got asked that about the order of my books and how
mm.
this particular one seemed to flow really well, and it was terrible putting it together.
Oh, really?
I mean, it was. Many times I thought the book was done, and I'd sent it to other publishers to see if they would pick it up. I mean, one publisher said it wasn't ready. Another one says, I don't know what the central theme is. And so taking all that feedback in and doing rewrites and reordering,
Mhm.
we got it to a point where I could send it back to Cav and Carey and say, well, here it is. What do you think? And they said,
Mhm.
well, we like it. We like the poems are strong, but it feels like something is missing. So we're going to send it to our to your editor,
Ah,
Baron Werzer,
yeah.
and he came up with the order for the book, which
Ugh.
the problem with Mississippi Season,
Interesting.
yeah, it was you're talking about, Emmett Till, you're talking about joy, you're talking about love, you're talking about kids, you're talking about all these things, and some
Right.
of it gets lost in the mix. So we have there are sections and then subsections. So with these great little magnolias throughout the book.
That's what I was going to mention. Yeah, I just love those. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so
find one
pulling it
here.
up. So my daughter Ella, who's upstairs
Yeah, we both have it.
here
Yeah.
now and then, she
Mm.
designed the magnolia in the book in those sections.
Oh,
Probably my
awesome.
favorite part of the book that
Oh,
she
tell
Yeah.
her great job. And then
she
they're
was in high
also in
school
the
then.
table of contents too.
Yep,
They show up.
yep, yep. So it's just sort of a little symbolic, visual thing. We didn't want to use numbers or names or anything. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I
Well,
want
very.
I want to point out too about shape. So one of my
Oh,
favorite poems is
Oh,
Your
right.
Pantoum. For a number of reasons.
yes.
But David Bowie is a big fan of it.
Yes. So
But I love any publisher that will, turn
yeah.
a poem on its side is like my favorite. So
Yeah. They're very kind.
So
Very
I
yeah.
want to, I want, excuse me, I want to see if anybody in the audience would like to say anything. I know, I can tell everybody's really, the people I can see are really listening and really we have you're with us, yeah. And I just wonder if anybody wants to say anything, ask a question. You don't have to. I'm just open it up. Um, yeah, Renee, welcome.
Yes, thank you both so much, Jen and January. This was just an amazing reading. The poems of both of you just floored me. Jen, in particular, I felt such a resonance with your poetry because of the time. And you mentioned you graduated college in 1984. I graduated in 1985, and I was studying in Germany when the Geraldine Ferraro was on the ballot also, and so it Germans were not particularly enamored of Americans at that time, so it was a hard time to be in Germany. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading both of your books just to sort of revisit all of the feelings that both of you brought up for me. Just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful reading.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that.
I just think also that Jen's work resonates so much because she's not afraid to, dip her toes into, politics. I know how active she is, away from poetry, but I have to pick and choose my moments, and I know Jen does too. But like this is a book that feels a bit timeless, even though it's referencing a particular time. It's still the themes in there still resonate, you know, and moving forward, who knows what this year will be. So it's nice to take a look at these
Right.
strong women that are highlighted and even harnessing a little of that, I don't even know if anger is the right word, but harnessing that energy
Mm.
and thinking about moving into November.
Well, I was thinking about all three of our books, and as I was going through them, I mean, there were overlaps not only in the, just in, Phyllis, you bring up Emmett Till,
Mhm.
you know, Trayvon Martin, you know, and Frank. I mean,
I
it's
do. Yeah.
there's a, you know, a circularity. I mean, you're right. They are rooted in a certain time. You know, we could all, you know, pick out our poems in here that, you know, they're talking about current events. That sounds like an elementary school term, but they are, and yet, you know, I'm going to go back to your poem Inheritance. I mean, I think that there's, you know, it doesn't end to an extent, you know, and I think that for me anyway, if I went into writing a poem, like nobody might know what this means in 100 years. It's, you know, it's like, well, yes, they will, because it will be in some Norton anthology with no, I'm going to be hopeful, but you know what I mean? I'm going to go back to what Claudia Rankine said, that, you know, I write what I write. So, you know,
Right.
for whatever reason, there's a lot that goes on in the world that just passes right through, you know, that I'm not moved to write about. You know, I'm moved emotionally, but I'm not moved to write about. And I think that's like a really different thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to add to how brave both of you are, really. I mean, you read the stuff and people hear it, and I don't know if people realize, you know, that when it's so personal and it's so honest like that, it isn't always that easy to put it out there. I don't know if it's that way for you. It certainly feels that way for me, but um, and you do it. You do it just so beautifully, and then we just feel so connected, you know, because you did that. And then I feel really connected. It's like, wow, you know, I can relate to what you're saying. Like, wow, that's really great to hear that out loud.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Jan, your love poems are just, I have to say, that is something I have never
Yeah,
been
yeah.
able to do. And you do
Look
it
for your next
so,
manuscript. So that's your prompt. There
there
you
you
go.
go.
She gets the
No, I mean, it's
assignment, right?
just, oh my God. You know, some of those poems are just, I'm in awe of them, and the
Me
ease
too.
and the honesty in which we're,
Yes.
to me, that is hard, you know,
Mhm.
to write about love
Mhm.
and sensuality and
Yeah.
sexuality
Yeah.
you know, and the joy of it, you know,
Mhm.
just the joy of it.
Mhm.
That's risky to
Yeah.
me,
For
you know.
me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I was inspired. Let's put it that way. I had a long, you know, it was long
I
travels looking for new
Right.
things to write about. But yeah, you know,
We're
that's
glad you were.
yes, it's, you know, it's a part of me, and I enjoy sort of, I like saying the unsayable,
yeah.
and I think we
Uh-huh.
all do that to a certain extent, and
Uh-huh.
so that's sort of where
Mm.
you know, where I get to do that. And I mean, there aren't. I mean, I think we should have more people who are talking about their experiences and intimacy and how, when, whatever that looks like, you know?
Yeah. I
Uh-huh.
agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you won. Yeah. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Wonderful reading. I loved both. Incredible work. And I was just curious. It's kind of a similar question to the one that I had, but it's I don't know why. There's something about the quality of both of your writing that reminds me a little bit of like maybe like Dorian Lau, like and Facts
Mhm.
About the Moon or something. You know,
Oh
like
yeah.
you know, there's and I was just wondering how, again, like this balance between like I have tunnel vision because I got to tell you this thing, right? Versus, you know, like the other side, which is where poetry just kind of takes us somewhere, and it moves a little bit. It's not like it's kind of it's in parallel with what you're
Mhm.
saying, but off of reality. It's kind of like dancing on top of reality or something. So I was just wondering about
Yeah.
how, you know, you check yourself, whether, you know, whenever you know, dip too far in one or the other.
Mm.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I don't know that I have an answer, but I don't know. And Jan, maybe, you know, you might have a different experience. When I'm like this past book, and the one before, I guess you'd call them sort of project books, you
Mhm.
know. I had written a number of poems, and I'm like, there's a, you know, pretty narrow theme, Geraldine Ferraro. I mean, and what would happen is, and again, I'm not sure if this is answering your question. That's a really, really narrow subject that I'm putting my own mythology on, if that, my personal mythologies. And you're right, that is something to be careful of. But what happens is, I become so involved in this that, like, that's the lens I'm looking through. So, writing a poem, say, about my friend who sends me these Christmas treats, the strufoli, that becomes part of this story then. Or I hope it does. That's what I hope. It's because this is what I'm thinking. Now I'm like in Ferraro land. I'm using that as an example, but whatever the topic may be. I don't know if that answered your question, but I like how you talked about what was that, like, go on top of reality. That was like really good. I'm going to think about that.
So yeah, Juan, maybe before you answer, Jen, are you thinking of a specific example? I know you didn't see it, you don't have it in front of you, but was there a particular um line or a stanza that struck you that way, or
Yeah, I mean, and on both of them, it's going to be hard for me to pinpoint something.
yeah.
But for example, one part where I was just like, I kind of got lost. I mean, into the poem was like putting your arm in the Mississippi, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
hot, or like hot as a dog's mouth. The
So
Yeah.
good.
like the, just like little moments where, like we're like, you anchor us in reality in one way or another, and then you take that out and we're somewhere else, right? So I was
Mhm.
just curious
Yeah.
about that, and especially in Jen's poem about, like, the like she's mentioning, it's very specific, right?
Mhm.
And then I was curious about that specificity,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it's,
And then
just
how you spin out from that kind of into
Mhm.
Yeah.
something metaphorical
Mhm,
or another
mhm, mhm.
image.
It's
Uh-huh.
like micro and macro, just like, how do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
move from micro to
Right.
macro? And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
both do it really, really well.
So
That's
isn't
why I
that
was
like
just
the
very
idea of the
curious.
camera, like zooming in and out, like with a
Yeah.
camera? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
When you
it's,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, Phyllis. Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sure.
No, that it's funny one that I love that with the dog's mouth. It's so good. And then there's a dog in one of my favorite poems that's written after the insurrection,
Oh,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
dog, and there's that dog
I
again.
have a few dogs in there now that you mention it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Dogs in the
yeah.
book.
But it's funny, that is such a great metaphor. That's a simile. It's so good
Mm.
and it's so perfect. And it's one of those moments, you're right, that, you're in the Mississippi and then all of a sudden, there's this dog's mouth. And I love that moment too. It's
Mhm.
almost shocking.
Yeah.
There's so much movement, it's like, what happened?
Yeah,
So
yeah, it reminds me of almost like when you're not really, like, if you're ever not paying attention in the class and then they say something, you're like, what happened?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you were
yeah,
paying
yeah,
attention. And if
yeah,
you were paying
yeah,
attention, you're gonna dive like into
Right.
a deeper consciousness or
right.
something.
Right. Well, okay. So I'm not sure if I'm going to answer it. Thank you. I don't know. I like, so Jen knows this, and I think we both do it. We like complication in our poetry. And I know I like to see, sometimes I like to see how much I can put into a poem and make work. I mean, I
Yeah,
certainly have enough poems that don't work. And Jen is probably seeing most of them. So, moving out of the moment and then trying to talk more precisely about that moment. Um, and I know for me, the last few years, I'm trying not to use as many similes. So I'm trying
yeah,
not to be, occasionally I do it like hot as a dog's mouth, but um, how can I describe it, not use like or as? It
yeah,
still means
yeah,
I'm describing it. So, like, how can I, I'm trying to let the thing be the thing. So I'm doing that. And then I had another point I was going to make, but now I can't remember. But oh, I know. Trying to I think we both write because we're trying to learn something new or get to some truth. And I think for both of us, there's no fun in writing a poem. You can get to the end and you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
Right.
you know. So, and sometimes we can get around that through language, through the startle of language, through surprise. I mean,
Right.
when you don't want, like, I mean, Jen's writing about, historical people, some of them living, and some of them we know so well, like Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi. So, what is the surprise about Nancy Pelosi? What can she say that we don't know about yet? And so that's a challenge. And I think it's a remarkable one. I mean, like many people know the story about Emmett Till. Um, but I also think people need reminders about it. So how can I say it in a way that, you know, when you're writing about Emmett Till and you've got like 6 or 7 poems that you've written separately, how do you not repeat that same historical information over and over again? So there are ways that, like, you look at poems individually and then you look at them, as part of a collection and just making sure they're, harmonious. But I'm gonna just really quickly read this part of Relinquishing, which is one of the poems Jen read tonight. It's the end, and this great image of the oyster, or related, right? Pearl adjacent image. Um, this is the end of the poem. When I call to thank her, we talk about turmeric. Actually, in the previous line, she says, G's cancer leaps throughout her body. When I call to thank her, we talk about turmeric. I ask her, as a vegan, would she wear pearls? The oyster, pried open, for its hard, conforming spit, looks clitoral, the salty, faceless meat. I mean, like that description. I mean, it's sort of like the digging down and down and down and going further. And I also love, sometimes, it's the hard sounds in these lines and like the abrupt stops, like, hard conforming spit, you know, uh, it looks clitoral, the salty, faceless meat. I mean, like, she's playing with language, not just the words, but the sound and how those words ride out and complete the thought. So everything in Jen's poems kind of play off, one another. Like there's a lot, like everything she does, like most poets do, but is really particular to Jen, is intentional. And that intentionality comes through in the work. And it's just sort of kind of nice to watch her mind work.
Well, there are 2 questions that I got from you that I ask myself all the time when I'm writing. Number 1, what's at stake in the poem? And that goes to your point about,
Mhm.
what am I going to say about Nancy Pelosi that you couldn't go to Wikipedia and find out? What are you
Right.
going to say about Emmett Till? Which brings me to the next point, and this is something else you've always asked. Why am I the one to tell this story?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. And I ask myself, why am I the one to tell this story? And what's at stake for me, for the writer?
Yeah.
We can all agree that the Emmett Till, it's a tragedy, it's a horror story. But you do something with it in the book too. I mean, I remember the first time reading like the draft, the manuscript. I don't know if you sent it out, and it was like this meandering river. I mean, you had the speaker going down into Mississippi, you know, in one condition, say, divorced, or, after like a drought, and confronting all of this and then coming up with love. It's the Odyssey. It's a myth. It's mythological. So that's what the Emmett Till story stands on its own. I mean, obviously, but it's also part of one of the visitations that the speaker has. If that makes sense. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, where are we? Let's see. I'm just wondering if anybody else wants to say anything or comment in any way. And then I think I don't know if we arranged for you to have like closing poems. I could probably come up with something, but if you don't, yeah, if you had something short to take us out. But before that, I just want to see if anybody else, has a thought or a comment or just want to say wow or
I don't know about Jen, but Phyllis, if you wanted to read one of your poems.
Yeah.
oh my
You
goodness. Okay, well,
please.
I could read Inheritance. It's kind of a pretty
Perfect.
heavy poem to end on, but since you've been mentioning it,
It's
what do you
beautiful.
think? Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I know. Why don't I read Inheritance and then why don't you read the regret, the poem about
Oh, okay.
no regret to end us on a, on a more positive note.
Unless Jen wants to read one of her joy poems, then that's cool.
Oh, I'm getting you. That'll take a while to look for. So you
Okay.
we don't have time for that.
Yeah, I did. Well, so is there anyone else that wants to comment in the chat? Oh, I see Cynthia. Sorry, Cynthia. I say wow. She says wow. Yeah, I said
Thank
wow
you.
before too. Beautiful reading and conversation. Thank you. Yeah, from Cynthia.
Cynthia.
There
I
you are,
can't see
Cynthia.
who's here on my phone. I'm just
Yeah, she's here with her picture. Yeah, yeah. And Jane is here and Angela's here. Oh, and Sue. I don't know if Sue, are you still there? Because your picture isn't there, but Sue is a big fan of January's.
Oh, well, thank
I
you.
hope I won't embarrass you by saying that, Sue. So I think I was mentioning to you, Jan, that I was at a reading, and my friend is the poet laureate of Belmont, California, and Sue had a poem there that won an award, and it was a poem that was written after one of your poems. And I wish I could remember which one, but if Sue
Thank
was
you.
here, she could say. But so after the reading, I approached her and said, do you want to meet January on Zoom? And she was like, you're kidding, right?
oh.
Yeah, so
It's nice
yeah,
to meet
so
you virtually.
exactly, yeah. Okay, well, let me find my poem then. This is a poem that so I haven't been able to write political poems really. I've written a few, but since this book came out in 2020, I just can't do it right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
And
hard.
I hope I hope you're gonna inspire me, both of you. And also I just want to say how much I have learned from both of you, and hearing you talk tonight and reading your poems and getting to know you. It's been just really remarkably rich for me, and I feel like, okay, what's this about no similes and no metaphor?
Oh, well.
Wow, I mean, that's something to think about. I never heard that before. So yeah, and just in general, just seeing how you do it. And so I'm honored to read my poem, and I have to find it. I wrote this after, so my book is a lot about healing trauma, and the trauma is in the form of the news, and it's also in the form of my own trauma. And I heard somebody talking about, she was giving a webinar, and she was saying that somebody learned that the world wasn't safe because his parents had been in a concentration camp. And so this finally got to me, that I actually felt what that meant to be part of a community that even though I wasn't there and none of my relatives that I knew of anyway had actually been there. And the thing about this poem, when you talk about personal, when this book came out, it felt too hard to put it in the first person, so I put it in the third person, and then after that I changed it back and put it in the first person. So I'll read it as is in the book. Inheritance. When she hears him say he learned the world isn't safe because his parents came out of the camps, she finally feels the explosion of this in her blood. She told herself the place she grew up so far away from there. Her parents never there either. Home was Brooklyn, was Lower Manhattan. They married, escaped with her to the suburbs, safe streets to walk in the sun. On their bodies, new clothes, new shoes on their confident feet, waiting for the bad thing to happen. The way her grandfather waited for immigration to bang on his door, deport him every day of his life in this country. Her grandmother's stories, hiding under a sheep's belly to escape the pogrom. That wasn't anything to do with now, and it wasn't the camps, because she had to lie to herself. Everybody did. She is away from her birthplace. Her life is on her own. But every day now, for years, she wakes up with the dread. Surely she's going to die. Every day, she can feel it. The betrayal, nowhere to run. Her mother, now the enemy. Her father, the helpless one whose dark side unfurls. As if her home were a camp that nobody noticed. Like there was barbed wire surrounding that house, this thing so big, so impossible to imagine, even when it's happening, is still alive, like the monster's eye in the horror movie as it stares into you, the thing she doesn't want to feel barreling through her.
Mm,
Oh, wow.
that's a terrific poem.
That's a great poem.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you for reading it.
That means a lot, really.
It
Thank
really
you.
is.
Yeah.
And it's so, oh, I love it on the page too, just the
Yeah.
way all these stops through. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And now Jan's going to
Take us out, I guess.
take us out with no regret. Yeah.
All right.
Opposite end of the
Go.
spectrum.
All right. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And thank you, Jen and Phyllis and and David and everyone. Thank you. Regret nothing. If at 4 a.m. you find yourself awake and alone, curled up in your half empty bed under a flashlight's white light, reading a poem, little moon casting its aura across the page, regret nothing. Not the clothes piled in the corner, not the drawers closed like caskets, the unpacked lunches, the bedtime story trapped in its book, the child's glove under the couch, missing the body it protects, all that must be swept, bundled, and carried off to somewhere else, only to return to the source of your unmaking. Regret nothing. Even as a glimmer of yourself catches you in the mirror like a stranger. Walk into the day with your whole heart intact. Walk into the center of everything. Leave nothing in your wake.
Mm.
Mm.
So,
Thank you.
thanks, Jan.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you.
Phyllis.
Thank you
Thank
both so
you.
much, and thank everyone for coming. It's been just a pleasure. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you,
as
Phyllis.
always.
Thank you, Dave.
Keep
Thanks,
in touch,
everybody.
yeah. And everyone have a great summer. We'll be back in October. So we're taking a break. I hope everybody has a really good summer with no fires and
Mm.
Yeah.
and lots of good weather and everything else.